One of the main goals of this channel in the last year, especially, has been to promote um, foreign affairs and more specifically ending our involvement in multiple conflicts. So we're bombing 7 countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, and Somalia. Um, and these started under Bush and Obama, and then Trump, while campaigning, says, "Oh, Obama's foreign policy is so terrible," and then he proceeds to stay in every single one of his wars. Um, and this was something that bothered me, which I could already see coming, which is why I didn't vote for him. But what I thought was very funny is that I oftentimes contrast my mindset as someone who initially got into politics as a Obama supporter until finding out about all of the different conflicts we were involved in, how many people had died, and how much money had been wasted that could have gone to humanitarian efforts in his own country. But nonetheless, when I thought critically about what he was doing overseas, and domestic issues weren't that great either, but we can get into that on a whole other day. Um, I broke it off. I said I can't support this person anymore. I'm really disgusted with who they are. I could still say he's a good speaker, but I was able to objectively ask myself, do I support this policy? And when I weighed all of those civilian deaths, versus him being a good speaker or seeming as if he knew what he was doing, I just accepted that this was someone I could no longer support. And I was very satisfied to have not been old enough to vote for him either time he ran. But I look at a lot of Trump supporters, and I see their responses to I guess the wars question, because of the fact that it's not talked about on TV or really by their favorite character, Trump, that often. It seems it's an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. There is a person in particular I spoke with on Twitter, and just to give you an idea of how, because I talk about them being a cult and this group think, but it extends to both sides, and we've talked about bipartisan stupidity. Within days of Trump giving that speech where he identified himself as a nationalist, I believe it was at a rally. She calls herself a nationalist on her account. Um, you know, and that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Where now all of a sudden, because this politician came forward with a term, you're now that term too. So that's one thing. But when I started thinking about the other side, because what you have to understand is one of the chief problems with progressivism and this two-party system is that you have a lot of people like myself who have an ideology that they adhere to strictly, and this is calling for getting out of all of the wars, some other things as well. But when you put them up against, uh, or rather in the same voting block as participants in the Democratic primary, as let's say people who are just kind of go with the flow. I don't like Trump. They're a lot more willing to support someone like Gillibrand or Harris or Booker, who are now known for being Trump's opposition, team, but nonetheless supported moderate blue dog stances that included aggression within these conflicts, or otherwise would lead you to believe they're not really committed to getting out of any of these various conflicts. And I've stated this before. I think both parties are filled with a bunch of warmongers. But I gave the Democrats credit for unanimously, as a collective in the Senate, voting for the resolution that would get us out of Yemen. But when I looked at the names that were included out of the Republicans, the Cruz, for example, who this person also supports, I thought to myself, I went up and I asked her, "Do you want to, bomb all of these people that have never done anything to us and help in starving them to death?" She'd probably say no. But if she can personally feel as if this is not something that should be done, and she can look at these pictures and say, "That's terrible, that's evil, that's awful," which I don't even know if she could do that, but let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say she's not a sociopath, then why would she allow herself to be complicit by voting for these individuals? And you don't have to hate these people, these politicians that support the Yemen civilian war, or civil war rather, to like them personally. Oh, this one politician is so good, is such a good speaker. Am I going to vote for him? No, he supports a genocide. It's that simple. And what ultimately comes to be the case is that now I'm left with millions of people who voted for Trump. That I like to believe there's a group that can break away and say, yeah, that was a bad move because of this conflict, or there are those who aren't aware that if you were to inform them of this, they would say, yeah, I'm not going to vote for anyone who supports that position. But if they don't, what do you do with them? And I guess I'm saying that because a lot of times when I talk about political things, people say, that's just an opinion. Well, it's not my opinion that we're bombing 7 countries. It's not my opinion that we've spent $1 trillion in all of these combined. It's not my opinion that 85,000 Yemenis under the age of 5 have been starved to death, or killed rather, as a result of that conflict. These are all things that I'm not making up. I'm not saying we should do this. It's all fact. So when you start putting up facts of civilian deaths and murders and homicides up against, well, I just like this person more, okay, then you really lose a lot of respect for the intelligence of that person. I've had, and in the last just year alone, I've had so many conversations with people online and especially in person where I didn't really contribute that much because of a gradual feeling of just, why am I even bothering with this? Where they'll compliment and say, oh, yeah, you know what you're talking about, man, you know what you're talking about. And then you get their position on, a number of issues or a set of issues. And you walk away thinking they're the dumbest person in the world. I had a woman who on Twitter said, oh, I agree that we need to get money out of politics. Citizens United, yeah. Well, she didn't even say Citizens United. Probably doesn't know what that is. But she says that's something to, that should be done, while supporting Cruz and Trump, who, one of which is married to a Goldman Sachs executive or, individual employee of high notoriety. And the other one ran initially without the influence of PACs and donors and corporations of that like, only to reverse it after he got the nomination. So this person is preaching one thing while doing the complete opposite. That's like me saying, oh, I'm so sick of all these warmongers. I hate bombing all these different countries. And then, I go and vote for Obama for a 3rd term after just seeing him do this for 8 years. And I guess what I'm trying to convey is, what is the cutoff point? Like, what do these people need to hear about these particular politicians to just say, screw it, I'm done with you? Because I don't know what it's like to blindly worship the ground someone I've never met before walks on. I remember when Bernie finished his presidential campaign, he was going around telling people to vote for Hillary, and if you don't vote for her, it's a protest vote, you're throwing your vote away, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't agree with him. I didn't watch that stuff. I didn't support him in that particular quest. Because I saw it as the complete antithesis of what he had campaigned for. I've got my disagreements with Ron Paul, but his choice to not endorse Romney after he lost to him in the 2012 Republican primary was still a respectful and courageous thing to do. Saying that there's no difference between him and it was accurate. So all of this is being said simply to tell you I don't get why we have these people who can see a policy that is terrible, or a set of policies that are terrible, that are resulting in the murders of thousands of people, and just accept that they need to vote for this person. They need to still like this person. They need to have a high opinion of them. And then I find it very comical when I have people who tell me, you can't look down at them for having a different opinion. You can't do, no, I can do it. I can say, I think this person is stupid. I don't want to waste my time talking to this person anymore. Talking to them is like talking to a brick wall. And it's not about being an elitist. It's due to a frustration with human lives not being of value to people that call themselves humanitarians. You go up and you ask any of these people, do you think human lives matter? And they would probably say yes. While they support presidential candidates or presidents or senators or governors or congressmen that back genocide. There were 37 senators who voted for keeping us in Yemen, just ending the debate altogether before anything was even settled. All genocide backers. But how many of them are going to have a voting base that says, you know what, I'm all for tax reform and get rid of Obamacare, and yeah, man, but Going and murdering people that we, in a country we had nothing to do with, that's horrible. I don't even want to put up with that. How many of them are going to cut off the umbilical cord and say, I'm an independent thinker, I have morals, I have principles, that's it? Just like I oftentimes get told, I have this litmus test, people have to be important, have to agree with me on everything. No, no, no. I said it before and I'll say it again. I want a Republican candidate who is pro-life, anti-abortion, whatever. Maybe the anti-LGBT stuff, I'm still kind of about that. But if you give me someone that says they're pro-life and they support getting out of all of these different wars, I'd vote for them. Because then I could actually believe that there's some Christian who hears from God, let's not murder people within someone's stomach, as they say, which I'm not agreeing with, but whatever. And let's not murder a bunch of children and other civilians who had nothing to do with causing us any harm. I could believe them then, because they would be preaching domestically what they're going to preach abroad as a senator or congressman. But we're not getting that. We're getting the same warmongers who talk about being pro-life and they want to abort all these innocent babies, and then saying nothing as their government bombs babies. In fact, voting to keep that going. And their voters are so stupid they won't even get upset. They won't say, hey, we support you on everything else, just stop doing this or you won't get our support anymore. And you know why that is? Because we have established an era of personality over policy, style versus substance. And whenever you have that kind of system, and it's in more than politics, and we can maybe talk about that on a later date. Anytime you have that system, that means people who preach what would normally be considered a good thing are now to be subjugated to stupidity. Just like, for example, I went on Bernie's page 2 days ago, or was it yesterday, whatever day it was, with the Yemen resolution, and most people were saying, "Good job! I'm so happy that we're finally getting out of here, woohoo!" But you had idiots that came over there and said, "Well, how many years this been going on? You didn't do anything about it. You weren't saying this." And there's genuine criticism to apply when you have a conflict that goes on for years and that people just let happen. But none of these people are celebrating, someone like Barbara Lee, who saw the mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan before anybody got murdered, miles away and years ahead of loads and loads of other individuals. So this idea that they're so in tuned with these foreseers of problems is not even topical. But when I think about cutting off any contact with these people, I say that not because I want to create some, monolithic thought. We can all support one position in society. Quite the opposite. When you look at what people will do and what they won't do, a lot of times it's influenced by what we perceive others will think. Just like, for example, even if it wasn't against the law in some places, most people would not walk out of their house with no clothes on, because people will call them a pervert. They'll say you're so gross, disgusting. Some might even take pictures. It's not something they would do based off of who is around them. Now at home they do it because no one's around them. At least no one that they don't consider to be someone that would not look down at them for doing this. So there is a shaming part of what is considered moral and correct and decent. But why is this not the case with our politicians? Just like if you go back to the FDR years, you had opposition to Social Security. Now no one talks about getting rid of that because they know they can't win. So if we established a state of affairs where all of the presidential candidates, all of the gubernatorial, all of the congressional, senatorial candidates all said, we have differences on social issues, but we're not going to get involved in any of these unconstitutional, not authorized by Congress wars. And if we do, I'm opposed to it. If you had that, we could stop being the country that calls itself fighting against terrorism and then is supporting over 70% of the world's dictatorships. But again, that kind of deep thought and that kind of critical thinking just doesn't seem to be evenly distributed. Instead, what happens is we have these people who just blindly vote for someone because somebody else told them to. This same woman I was talking about earlier, she goes and she tells people to go vote for DeSantis in Florida after Trump endorses him. I bet you her and about maybe 90% of DeSantis' voters didn't even know anything about that man, other than Trump endorsed him and he, said we need to do what Trump is doing. That's it. No critical thinking skills whatsoever. So it's pathetic. I think these politicians that support these conflicts are scumbags. But, you know, for as much as I like to give voters the benefit of the doubts, they've been complicit in this. They choose not to go and read or learn any of this stuff. Um, and I'm done telling grown people, you know, oh, I shouldn't look down on you. If I can look this stuff up on what is considered the World Wide Web, what is known to be a database that is as accessible to me as far as when you go on there and you look stuff up. Basically, anything I know is public information, which is why I don't have the highest level of patience with a lot of people when it comes to this advanced digital age. And especially when they try to push back against what you tell them, you know, as if I made this up. I'd love for all of our the American-made murders and assassinations to be a hoax, to be this big joke that I'm spewing out, because that would mean the people would be alive and it wouldn't be something that is actually destroying the U.S. I actively think these politicians and their supporters do destroy the U.S. because they let these other countries see us act as a rogue state that's dedicated to messing with anywhere and everywhere just because we can. And that's not a good appearance for us. So, as for getting rid of these people, I'm doing it. I'm sick of playing patty cake. I'm done talking to them. I don't interact with them. You know, there are a billion people in this world, if not more. One person saying I don't want to speak to you if you like warmongers is nothing.